All right. So,
So I think I'll begin,
yes, do begin, Nachi.
right?
Yeah.
Welcome everyone to the Women's National Democratic Club. For those of you who've never been to our beautiful home at DuPont Circle, we invite you to come to see this incredible exhibition that you're going to get a whiff of, an introduction today, but you have to come by and look at it. Just a few words about the Women's National Democratic Club. We are almost 100-year-old institution. We were created 2 years after women won the right to vote. So next year we celebrate our centennial. So it's a very, very, very important year for us coming up. It just so happens that next year is going to be seminal in so many other ways. The midterms are happening. Are we going to be able to hold on to any kind of a majority, etc.? Everything hangs in the balance. So the Women's National Democratic Club is a social club. It is an art gallery. It is a museum. Our archives are in the Library of Congress because our history is the history of the women's movement in this country. We do speaker programs multiple times a day. We do art programs. This is one of them. We do performances. We are a multifaceted organization, and we invite you to come and visit our beautiful house. We're also very involved in public policy. So in a sense, we are like a think tank, but we're very much into fun as well. And so I think that we're a very healthy combination. And so if you're not a member, consider joining us, and welcome today. It's my pleasure now to hand over to Nusrat, who's going to introduce the artist.
Thank you, Nuchi. And Nuchi failed to say that she's the president of the WNDC, so and has been on and off for many years. So I will say that on her behalf. I'm the director of the Visual Arts and Museum Affairs of the club, and we have the responsibility of maintaining our museum, which has beautiful collection of antiques, as well as organizing 4 contemporary art shows of artists who live in the area, and give them an opportunity and us an opportunity to see their wonderful work. And Alice came to us, and we're delighted that she did, because we want to show art of the kind that she does. And we're just going to have a very informal conversation, and then Alice will exhibit through a PowerPoint presentation that Claire Sandberg, who is the assistant of Visual Arts and Museum Affairs at the club, will handle for us. She's very good at it, and she's also the one who puts us on Zoom. So technical stuff is Claire's department. Alice, since a number of us, she included, and you and me, and there are a number of other people in the club who are not originally from the United States, but immigrated here, came here either to study or to work or with our families. So I know that your work, particularly this exhibition, has to do with exactly that, you know, your own history and story of when you came to the United States and how it impacted you. So I'm going to ask you to say something about that, because that's, I think, important for a lot of people to understand your work as well.
Yes, of course. Thank you. Thank you for having me. And if I could begin by just saying thank you to Nusrat and Claire and the Women's National Democratic Club for hosting my artwork. It is always been important to me to share the work because it should never just live in a vacuum. You know, I had a professor at the New York Studio School, Karen Wilkin, who said those exact words to us every day is art should never live in a vacuum. It needs to have its own life outside. And during the last 2 years, especially working on this body of work and with the pandemic, this has given me quiet time with a chance to think about my family history. So, as you mentioned, I was born in Taiwan and I moved to the States when I was 2 with my family. My father came for an educational opportunity as an engineer for himself at the University of Maryland. And my mom spoke no English and came with my 2 sisters. And so it was 3 girls in tow. And my dad has a photograph of me in the airport in Osaka as we're doing a transfer of my first few steps as an 18-month-old baby walking into this new world. And so it's been really wonderful to be able to think about how life has changed so much for them as well as for myself. Becoming an artist was always something I imagined, but never really understood how to do. And as a family who grew up in these kind of duality cultures in the 80s, just even Nusat, we talked about this with our first name. I was born Shi Ying Lan, Shi Ying Lan, and then became Alice when my family became American citizens. It was much easier for my friends and my teachers to pronounce. And my parents thought, this is what we do to become Americans. And so immediately at age 6, loving Alice in Wonderland, I became part of both cultures, having my first name as Alice and my middle name as my Taiwanese name. And so when thinking about growing up in that kind of household, eating what we ate, looking and watching and listening to Taiwanese, to Mandarin, to learning English, and then going to Chinese school, like all of this is just who I always was. But when I started studying painting specifically, it became a chance for me to think about color and space in a completely new way, because I suddenly had the chance to put something on canvas or put something on paper that I made, that no one else made. And although I have so many influences, this past 2 years, I've had to answer a lot of questions for myself, as well as for my family. So I have 2 young children, and we are in a biracial family. My husband is Jewish American, and my children are now wonderful little walking beings who are also half me and half my husband. But with my 7-year-old starting to ask me questions, I started to ask them for myself too. Claire, could you go to the next image? So when thinking about landscape and pulling in all the things I started learning about in Western culture and in Eastern culture, I wanted to find new ways of recording these ideas as well as the imagery I was finding. And so I have been using paint as a chance to look at color, but also to think about that individual experience of who I am and all the things that kind of run through my brain.
Next, yeah. Oh, shall we continue talking, or would you like to go to the next slide? Next image.
Either one, whatever is better for you.
Yeah, no, go ahead. I think we should just run through the exhibition, because this is something that we really want to show to, as everybody knows, PowerPoint presentations have their limitations. So everybody, you must come down, and the club address will be posted and the website will be posted for you by Claire. But I wanted to tell you that we are open to everybody, and the best times to come are from 10 to 4 on weekdays. So Monday to Friday from 10 to 4 is an ideal time to visit. And we do wear masks. We are being very cautious, socially distanced, and so on. But the mayor has opened up venues, as you all know. So call and be sure to come. And as I said, Claire will post the information for you so that you can call and come. The reason we say call and come is because it may well be that something else is going on in the ballroom and you may not be able to visit at that time, and that would be a shame. So do call and come. I wanted to ask you also about your your studies. I mean, first of all, were your parents all right for you to be an artist? Because I know that in a lot of families, particularly from the East, there is great ambitions for children to be, as we all know, lawyers, doctors, etc., engineers, etc., etc. And to be an artist, even though in the East it is a revered profession, and they are masters and so on, considered to be very important in society. But nonetheless, it is not an income generating as it is to be a lawyer or doctor. So, how did your family react to your deciding that you wanted to be an artist and have that as your career?
Oh, that's a great question. Claire, can we go to the next slide? Then we can have a few more images to get a sense of the size of the pieces. So to go back to your original experience about having art in front of you, Nusat, I'm glad you mentioned that, because as an educator, that's something I say to my students quite often, which is art should always be experienced in person,
Yes.
right? We have our phones and we have our computers, but that will never tell you how you feel with the size that the artist intended for you to experience it. And so those decisions that we make, that's part of every artistic journey, right? Is that we have to first decide what is the right size for me to even begin this image, and then how do I put it down, and will I continue with this size? So to have a couple of images of the ballroom, and Claire, if you would just kind of click through every 20, 40 seconds would be great, because then this way we can just continue talking while the slideshow is going. And so thank you, Claire. And so Nusat, to answer your question, my family has always been supportive of creativity. And my sister is a doctor, so that does help and check that doctor box.
Yes.
And then we have the education, which became more of a priority than anything else. So when I went to the University of Maryland, I went in knowing I wanted to be an educator. And so my family was very supportive of understanding that continuing education for others is just as important as my own personal individual education. And as I continued studying art with education, because I am an art teacher, I was able to pursue both passions. And I have a colleague who asked me just 2 weeks ago, would you ever do this full time, just paint full time? And I said, honestly, if I had the perfect world, I would do both. I would continue teaching and I would paint, because there's something about sharing the vision with others and showing them how to stay on a composition, how to work through visual components, and asking lots of questions, why choose this blue? Or why use this imagery? Why make it this size? And so when I was able to learn how to be a teacher in my undergraduate degree at the University of Maryland, I then started teaching. And then after 4 years, I said to myself, I need more art. And my parents were very supportive of continuing my studies. And as I moved to New York to study at the New York Studio School, I find myself completely immersed in art, because everyone there is an artist. Not everyone's a good artist, but everyone is an artist in New York in some way. And I even worked in an art store because I met lots of artists. But we went to museums and we went to galleries, and I kept learning. And at my MFA show, I showed my parents all the things that they never imagined New York could be, because they always thought of New York City as a crowded, dirty, old city, right? But then I took them to Central Park, and I took them to see beautiful things at the Metropolitan Museum of Art. And suddenly they said, oh, this is New York. And as every year passes, my relationship ebbs and flows with my parents. They learn that I then become a mother, or I'm not just their daughter anymore. But I still paint, and I've always painted. And they will come see my work, and my mom, who is always my most honest critic, will go, you should have maybe a little bit more color in that paint. drawing because most of my MFA show was ink. And I had to really dig deep into that foundational level of working with black and white before I felt really confident working with color. And so now, as you can see, Nusat, in the space, I'm full of color now, but it took some time for me to get there. And she's always said to me, your paintings are too dark. I really think you should just add more color to it. And so with my parents, even by my side during this last year, I would call them and I would say, how do you write this in Chinese? Or what does this mean? So I would find images of things and I would say, I don't know what this says. Can you help me? And they would translate it for me. They would call me and they would speak to me about what it said. Or I even would ask them stories. Can you tell me about what it was like in Taiwan when you were a kid? And my parents say, why are you asking us these questions now? I said, well, in order for me to better know myself, I'd really like to know you better. And they now have lived in the United States longer than they lived in Taiwan. So they are also experiencing the duality just like I am. And when I can bring in images and architecture, I can find these things in layers that I work in and with acrylic. They'll say to me, "Oh, I can see something in there," and so they're quite engaged. So it has been a lot of education for all of us. And I find that, making marks, finding patterns, using colors to explore things, and just kind of using that imagination and letting it run during this last year has had some failures. I have some paintings that I turn around, they're not in the place where I need them to be. But then I have others that I see and I say, okay, I think this could go a little further, or nope, I need to stop on this one. So there's a lot happening in the studio. I typically work with about 3 paintings at once.
Yes.
I layer acrylic. It dries quickly, but I still sometimes need time to digest, to think, okay, for this particular one, it is the shape of the island of Taiwan, but I have flipped it and turned it upside down. Or I've added lanterns when we think of lantern festivals in the streets and walking through the night times. And so there's hills in some you'll see, and then there's almost speckles like stars, or even just images that I imagine it would be if I were there, but then still living in the States and looking around and seeing what it's like here. It's many of these paintings are just combinations of things.
Right. So as you said, there is a duality in one's life, which you have then carried on, not just through, well, a lot of people do it through cuisine, right, and through becoming chefs, because they keep yearning for the things that they ate as they were children and wanting to introduce that to the world and so on. But I think it's incredible that you decided that you would translate all of this, particularly in the last 2 years of being confined, basically, into rethinking that, yes, Courbet is wonderful. Yes, Western art is wonderful, but one doesn't really see that much contemporary Asian art in the museums in this country or even in Europe. And that is something that I think is truly lacking. I know that at one point Chinese art became the sensation, but then, as you said, there's art and art. Some of it, because it becomes the thing, becomes sloppy and not well thought of and just out there because it sells. But I think you have taken time and energy and thought into uh, developing in this particular exhibition, I think, a combination of your, not, I wouldn't say upbringing because you were brought up here, but basically your family's thoughts and stories and so on, and pictures and so on, that and combining it into the Western medium, because you're not doing calligraphy, you're not doing ink only, and so on. So I myself am fascinated by the stories of each one of your paintings. And so I'm going to let you continue again in talking about individual pieces, because there's some with, I don't know whether I should call them monograms
Mhm.
or seals or, that I think need explanation for me at least. Yes. And you've got, yeah, for example, these.
Thank you. Thanks, Claire. Yes, Musad. So this particular pairing is one of the paintings I kind of fell on. I was looking out my back window and seeing these trees. So I live in Howard County, Maryland, which has so many beautiful old trees. And as I'm looking through this very complex, intricate pattern, I then started thinking about, okay, well, putting that down, but not brown. There's something about that color that wasn't quite settling for me. So instead, I went towards green. And that started reminding me of a bamboo forest. And in my neighborhood where I grew up in Silver Spring, Maryland, I, as a child, would run down in the back of my neighbor's yard and start running through the bamboo forest. And we would pluck them down and we would stomp on them and play with them. But it was this garden, this wonderful space for children to explore. And so I started thinking, okay, well, looking at a painting is essentially looking in the way an artist looks. So viewing things through the eye of that artist, because just like a photographer looks through a lens, this is my visual lens. And then I came across these beautiful images in the National Taiwanese Museum of these curiosity boxes. And they had the same idea, which is, you have this container and the exterior seems quite plain. But then as soon as you open up one layer, then you'll find multiple, much more complex and fascinating things inside those spaces. And I wanted to treat these paintings, especially this pair, which can be, I think, viewed individually or together, but I'm glad we hung them together, is to say, keep looking, right? Look through the space. Don't just look at the exterior and the corners of the painting, but look into the painting and see what else is happening inside those. And to frame them with that yellow against the darker reds and the black and the umbers, it gave this spotlight, but wasn't a typical circular shape, but instead a shape that I found through those curiosity boxes. Because I myself am curious, I want to see what's inside those boxes, or I want to know what's next in these paintings as well. Because as I mentioned, I don't plan a painting, I just start. But then as soon as I start, sometimes I have to let it sit for a week or a few days, and then I find something, and then I put another layer on. So it was quite intimidating to paint over everything I had just painted. But then as soon as I did it, I felt really excited. And if there's a painting that's not exciting to me, I know that other people can feel it too. And when I put my energy into these paintings, I hope that that same energy is felt and experienced when someone walks into a room and sees that as well, draws you into it. So then, as you mentioned, these seals. So as you come closer into it, Claire, could you go back to two of them? I think let's start with I can't remember what number it is. The one before. Perfect, thank you. So this is the one that began, which was right at the time of the killings in Atlanta. And as an Asian American, an Asian female, I've always said to myself, I am who I am. This is me. There is a human here. I might have a certain color hair or eyes, might be a certain height. But this is, at the end of the day, we are human. And just the day before this, I took my family to a rally about AAPI hate. And we talked about what it meant to treat each other with kindness because we're human. And it didn't matter what color our skin was or what language we spoke, but that we all have a brain, we all have a heart, and we are human. And the seal goes back to mailing letters to each other and being able to use that wax seal, or using the red stamp, which is red is that beautiful color of celebration, of life, of happiness, of joy. And I wanted to bring that red, not as blood and not as any kind of gore. That's not what I was looking for when I put this red in, but instead of a reminder of what it really means when you slow down and you think about who we really are, and through the woods and through the thickness of whatever you might be looking through, that there a humanity in all of us. Claire, could you go to the next one? So I was making my second painting, and I called my parents and I said, what's another word for human? They're like, what do you mean? I said, in Chinese, there's so many amazing characters. Like, what's another character for human? My mom and dad said, let me call you back. We have to think about it. So as my dad would, he would go through a dictionary and start looking at words. And he immediately found this word, which also means human, but it means humanity. And so I thought to myself, that's perfect. It's not just about the person, but it's about what that person does and how we carry ourselves each day to be able to find beauty in landscape, to be able to look out the window and see gorgeous leaves and slow down to hear the sounds, right? And so with the landscape that I always add into the components of my painting, I want nature to be part of how we experience the world, and not just as people, but also as members of this earth as we walk through this space together.
I'm wondering if you would like to continue with a few more pieces of your artwork, and then I'd like to open up to questions. And please, amongst the audience, anybody who would like to ask, I guess you can raise a hand with these, I think, well, somebody, reactions, that's it, at the bottom. You can raise your hand, and we, either I or Claire will notice it and give you an opportunity to ask a question and chat with Alice. So which paintings would you like to go to, Alice?
We could go to the next one.
Okay.
That works for you.
I have to say that it was great fun deciding where these things should go on the wall with Alice. It was so quick, so efficient.
It's not usually quick and efficient.
Well, we certainly thought in a very similar way, so that helped. But anyway, yes, the koi pair.
Well, so one of the things that you mentioned when we were walking through is how to hang these works. And I had shared with you, one of my professors at the New York Studio School, Graham Nixon, said, you have to look at the whole wall. The whole wall is a painting. So Claire, can you go to the next one? I'm not sure if is it a full view? There you go, thank you. So it gives you a chance to see them together as a cluster, because as you look at a wall, it's an entire composition. It's no longer just one singular painting, but you have to think about everything in the room. And when I was walking through the space with you, I also really enjoyed trying to figure out what works best, because little things could talk to each other. Certain colors could pick up from one to the next. And when looking at this one, it was great to see that we could isolate that koi because they're so large on the surface and there's so much color in that one. But then to have the pair close to it, in between with the window and the natural light coming through, that I thought that was really wonderful to be able to enjoy that molding and to use the architecture of the building to our advantage.
Yes, absolutely.
Thanks. So Claire, could you go back one? Thank you. So this particular painting was a struggle. I remember working on this one thinking, how can I use these colors in a way that would work without damaging the attention? Because as we walk through the painting with our eyes, as we look at any part of the imagery, you should be held captive throughout, and you should be visually being able to be carried. And you don't want to just kind of escape through this one corner. You want the entire painting to hold your attention. And so for this one, I thought it would be really just fun and also exciting to see absurdly large koi against a landscape in a space that challenges your vision to see perspective. So whether you're looking at the edge of a island or peninsula that has this lighthouse where this kind of cloud of smoke is coming out of the water or the space or the town that it might be in, against the backdrop of this super bright kind of pinks and yellows and greens and blues that almost just kind of have this moment where you're thinking, hold on, am I looking at the ground? Am I looking in water? Or am I in the sky? And so I wanted this circular kind of oval shape S curve that the koi were making to keep you guessing, to keep that vision of engagement longer. And then adding that pattern on top gave you that additional question of, am I looking at brick? Am I looking on the ground? Is it cobblestone? Is it the tiny patterns that you find on the red envelope? And you said, we spoke about how miniatures had that beautiful feeling of just looking in this small little world with every surface covered in color or pattern. And I wanted to be able to isolate the koi, but also still bring some attention to them by using that pattern and pushing that space and challenging that vision just a little bit for this particular one. Nusat, is there one you would like me to talk about?
Well, what about the one over the mantelpiece? Because
Oh,
that,
yeah, sure.
yeah, that's a gorgeous one. Yes, that one.
Thank you. Claire, can we go to the next? Oh, no, let's stay on this one. It's hard to see how big it is. It's, I almost wish, if you, hold on, sorry, Claire, could you go to the next one?
Yeah.
I almost wish it was 3 times the size. I look at it now and I want to take it down and make a gigantic version and put it back up. Thanks, Claire. We can just go back to the one before. Yes, so this one is a triple square. So when I was at the New York Studio School, we talked a lot about the shapes of canvas and how our eye travels from one side to another and how the corners work together, or even when we're looking at diagonals. And so there's all these, things swirling around in my mind when working on a triple square. But with 16 inches high and 48 inches across, going back to that compositional element of thinking about, okay, how do I keep it just as interesting on the left, in the center, and on the right? And as you can probably recognize, Nusat, these are the woods in my backyard. I've been living in this house for 8 years, and these trees are everywhere. And as we look through, right, there's so much more beyond that. And in the spring, when everything is full, you can't see, but it's until the fall and the winter that in my backyard, there's the little Patuxent River that runs through. And only when the trees are bare can you really notice and appreciate that view. So when we're looking through the woods, what else could be there? What other things in your imagination can come, whether it's an ocean coming from the side, or it's a small red path that kind of drives you to walking and invites you in? Or could it be small little red moments on the bottom right corner that almost resemble footsteps or berries, give you an idea of scale against the landscape? When I think about my time at the Metropolitan Museum of Art looking in the Asian art wing, I think about those scrolls and how absolutely terrific they are when they're opened, because you just walk along this gigantic wall and it just goes on and on and on and on. But the scroll was meant to be viewed one section at a time. They would unroll and roll and unroll and roll. So you're supposed to really only see this one story, but it always leads to another one. And so I wanted this painting to feel like a part of something much bigger, that it could be on and on and on for another, 48 inches wide, where we could see space, but not really know exactly where we are. And as you mentioned, with ink and with ink artist and artistry, there is the value change of light, almost barely visible gray, to a very deep, strong, intense ink. And it's all about, grinding that ink and creating the varieties of value. And with this particular painting, I wanted to think about that, but in color, of how we can give ourselves a shift of values, but also push the question of space as we are all viewing, far, far, far deep into that right corner. There might be a hint of ocean, but then much closer, there's these waves or something else coming towards us.
Well, this is one of the reasons why we both talked about the fact that these paintings really have to be seen in person, because this painting, you've done such an excellent job that even in a presentation like this, you could feel that this is pulling you in. It's, the idea of, let me just walk into this painting, kind of thing. And certainly when you see it, en situ, it's definitely fascinating to me to see a number of your works that really pull the viewer in to see what else is going on. It's just not tree trunks, but it is also what's behind the tree trunks, or what's, the perspective that takes you back, which is, I think, fascinating. And to me, you were talking about the scrolls, but even the screens, that are,
Mm-hmm.
and particularly Western audiences that were drawn to screens, in their homes. This gives me that feeling, that you could fold it or divide it, or leave it flat, on the wall the way you have it. And so, yeah, to me, this is a very, very interesting painting. It's a shame in a way that it's hanging over the mantle, because you can't walk into it. But it was a horizontal piece that we wanted to adapt to the over the mantle, because that's a difficult situation there.
Claire, can you go to the next? I think it's the next two that give you the overview, right? So this kind of gives you an idea of how beautiful the building is, because I love that you have these columns that separate some of the space, so you can go from one wall to another without feeling, overwhelmed, and you can just kind of spend time in this one pairing, or go to another wall with this one single, and the columns give you that perspective as well.
Yes, I think we talked about this also, is that people often see art in a white box, in the galleries and so on, and that's fine. But I think if you want to feel how it might look in your home or in another space, this really gives you an opportunity to do that. And I think museums are doing that so well, particularly here in Washington. We have such great exhibitions where the whole room is created around paintings, and they use moldings, or they use color, or they do whatever. So we have an opportunity to see it, other than in the commercial galleries, which are always this very stark environment. So I think we've got just a few minutes, about 15-20 minutes, and I encourage anybody who would like to ask Alice any questions to please either unmute yourselves and speak, or show us your hand, or whatever you prefer to do.
I have a question.
Yes.
Beautiful artwork and lovely discussion. My question, Alice, is how, if at all, this past year, unfortunately, we've seen a rise in anti-Asian sentiment, and how, if at all, has that affected your work and your experience as you live this dual existence?
Thank you for your question, Melissa. That is my sister-in-law with her twin 3-year-olds who are trying to also engage in conversation with us on Zoom. So when I think about this past, I will most recently, there's now even more reason for art to be made because it is such an expression, and for the confidence that I have in my ability to put color on surface to share that and to show others that it is no longer in this world of art your traditional white European male. You know, women have a voice. We have a lot to say. We've always had a lot to say. And we have more and more chances to be able to share that with support. And with my particular family, especially with, you know, I have a mentor, Rosana Asar, who is also coming from another country, from Argentina, to this country to share her voice. Or with my husband, who is Jewish American, coming, you know, generations ago, coming to this country to learn about what it means to be here or who we are. I want that no matter who, everyone gets a chance to see beauty and everyone gets a chance to experience creativity and expression, and that it should never push you down. And we can only do what we can do. We can control what we can control. And this is the world that I want to create for others to enjoy and experience, because color is family, right? And we have joy in expression, and we can use our hand and our mark making to be individual. And we can celebrate that together with opportunities like this in a space like this, where everyone just can come together and gather and start speaking about what they see or what they feel when they walk through a space or when they look at artwork. But in terms of how it's made me feel as a Asian American or as an Asian woman in general, it gives me more reason to continuing the space that I'm in, which is educating. I teach at Bullis School. I've been teaching there for 6 years now, and I teach in the upper school. So 9th through 12th graders who are learning about their own identity and who are finding confidence. But I want them to have confidence. I want to show them what it means by trying to model that behavior as I continue my craft, while also my passion, and be a mother and a wife and a sister and a daughter and an activist and all of those things. So thank you, Melissa, for your question.
I see that Rosanna is also on this thing, and Rosanna also showed at the club. And I have to say that since I have been doing this, I really do enjoy the fact that we live in a city that is extremely international, with people from all backgrounds, all races, all religions, etc. And my attempt, whether male or female, is to show this wonderful variety that we have in our city, in our area. And it's not that we don't show white males, I can assure you we do. But more often than not, it is the women who approach us to see if they can exhibit. And through this venue of art, we bring other cultures into our club, which is equally important as the artwork itself. So we have had Ethiopian, we have had, a variety of people who have exhibited. And each one of them has brought, as you say, different color, different vision. And that's what's totally important. Any other questions?
Hello. Hi.
Yes.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, okay. Hey, Alice. I'm a friend of your husband, Mike's, and I just want to say that I really, really enjoyed your presentation. I just want to say that, you know, we've all been sort of locked inside. You know, this is, I feel that your paintings have this very, very three-dimensional tenet that you're asking us to sort of look in and then explore, like walk into, and sort of this number of different spaces. The painting of like Through the Woods, where you had there's just three dimensions going on, and you can really sort of venture out of your house. You know, you step out. We live in Maryland. I live in Maryland. Step out of my house, and it's just this soundscape. It's just, if I close my eyes, I don't even know where I am. It's just this wondrous humming and beautiful sound. And, you know, as I saw like the koi painting, also it's looking down into a 3D sort of pond. You know, it's that porcelain pond that's in your parents' backyard where you see this koi. It's like there's this really intense 3D invitation. If you can talk a little bit about that, about this idea of spaces. And it was interesting that you had, I think it was one of the humanity paintings near a window. And you could see, I mean, both paintings plus the window, they looked as though you were looking out windows. I mean, you looked like the humanity painting is like, you're in this room and you're looking outside. So it's an invitation to go, to fall in to this, you know, reality or surreality. If you can talk a little bit about that three-dimensional kind of invitational quality, that'd be great.
Absolutely.
And thank you.
Thank you. I hope you can come in person. I think that the experience of art, as Nusat and I talked about earlier, is not meant to be on this screen. You know, it's just not. You can't see the brushstrokes. You can't feel the layers or the tiny little detail until you get really close. And I used to work at the Phillips Collection as a museum guard. So I know how close you're supposed to get, and you're not supposed to get that close, but when you're in this space, no one's going to stop you from getting close. Claire, could you go back to a few, let's do one more. Keep going. There's this one corner painting, one more. This painting on the right. Yes, that would be great. Okay. So in this particular painting, I'm sorry, Claire, could you do one more? Yes, thank you. So when you talk about space and the invitation of space, this was one that I had a lot of trouble with because I had to figure out where I was and I couldn't. I kept painting on this painting. I turned it sideways, I turned it upside down. I turned it back sideways, I turned it back upside down. I had done it so many times to try to figure out where I was in this painting, because if I don't know where I am, you're not going to know where to go. And it's like you're the director of all the components and what time of day you want it to be, what colors you're going to choose, what moments you want to accept and enjoy, and what areas might be kind of confusing, but still in an okay way. And so when I created this particular one, I wanted texture to be a big part of the painting, as well as the space that may or may not be clear. And looking at it from the side, you're looking at the edge of architecture of a temple. When you walk into a space like that in Taiwan, it is spiritual. Depending on where you are, it could be very busy or it could be very quiet, but I wanted a quiet space. I wanted it to be much more meditative and reflective than this hustle and bustle of tourism. And so I wanted that evening feeling of that time when you went there and there was no one around. And then suddenly you notice this little bird that just kind of crept up on you. And so in the bottom right corner, I have this cliff, but it's not quite the cliff because you have a scale shift that goes into the rectangle of this dark blue where you start to feel a little bit of a chill. And so then there's a temperature shift there. And as you're looking at this, it's as if you have two happening at once. And so I hoped that this painting, this pagoda painting, would give more space for someone to wander, and then to bring in elements of nature, of flower, of bark, of blossoms, but then human-made architecture that then adds more to the experience while having this, edge of a whole full moon coming and the glow that surrounds it. So I don't think that answered your question, but I hope that gave you a little bit more about how I think about space when I'm creating it.
I'm happy that you showed this photo. I mean, I'm sorry. See, we're in this digital space. I'm happy that you showed this painting. Yeah, thank you. Thank you.
Yeah.
Alice, this is Sarah from Bullis. And it's so nice to see so many of your coworkers and even a student online. And I'm wondering if you could tell us a little bit about how your work as a teacher informs your own painting. And, for example, as you critique yourself, do you find yourself drawing on your skills as a teacher and how you might critique your own students?
Thank you. That's a great question. Sarah, I actually have a painting in mind I want to show you. Claire, could you go back to the other koi painting? I think it might be 4 or 5 slides before this one. This one, thank you. So, Sarah, to answer your question, how does critiquing myself and the lessons I've been trying to teach my students, how does it affect my work? It affects my work quite often because I tell them to be bold. And I also want to be bold in my work. And these shapes that you see on the top third of the painting is a shape I have not painted before. These rainbow colors I've never really put down on canvas, but I wanted to try it. And instead of thinking about it, I just did it. And it sat there for about a solid 3 or 4 weeks after, before I figured out what the next step was, because I hesitated. And just last week, I told my students, don't hesitate, just do it. It's paint. What's the big deal? You can just paint over it. And I had to say that to myself with this painting. I have absolutely no clue what to do. And then when I came into it, I thought, well, I could try this. So I did. So then I added a tree on the lower 2/3, which now I've almost completely covered up. The only areas of the tree you can see are through the layers of the koi. So you can only see those there, but I knew I wanted to try putting this tree down, and then it didn't work. So then I thought, okay, now what? Continuing my conversation with my parents and thinking about the different aspects of Taiwan today, instead of only looking back at the historical components of the artifacts, I wanted to think, well, what is that landscape that we often think of in Taipei? As I was born in Taipei, it had to be the iconic building of 101. And so I thought, okay, adding this in gives me a way to show others that New York City isn't the only beautiful cityscape. We have so many other cities all across the globe that also have this monumental structure that changes the entire vision of what you see, because then you see as a little bit further away, there's mountain forms, because Taiwan is an island. And as we think about these cities, they're also flanked by an island with mountains as well. And so you have the kind of hustle and bustle of the city inside. And then on the lower half, what's happening, which is water. And we have an island surrounded by water. And I returned to the koi because just thinking about my memories of a child going to Taiwan and experiencing places and monuments and cities with my family and markets with my aunt, I would see these koi and they were a huge part of my memory. And I wanted to be able to capture that into this space while also still honoring this idea of don't hesitate, just do it. And if you need to take a break, but don't give up on it and come back to it with a fresh pair of eyes. And that's how I often lead my critiques with my students as well. Thank you, Sarah.
Thank you so much.
I'm
Hi,
just
Alice.
sorry. Go ahead, please.
I just wanted to say I'm so glad I read to the end of the Bullis newsletter so that I discovered this was happening. Alice is my daughter's advisor and her art teacher, and I just think it's fabulous for students to finally see what their teachers do. Because when you're in class, you spend so much time focusing on your work and your peers' works, and then to see that your teacher really is an artist in her own right, I think is great. This is one of my favorites, but I was just wondering, the three sisters, can you pick who is who? Like they're two birds, and then I don't know if I see the third. Which one is you?
Well, okay, so my sisters are on the call. Thank you for the question. I appreciate you joining. And when you see this, can you see the three of them? So that's the first thing I really wanted to make sure is that it's not always such a fast read, right? So when we learned at the Phillips collection that the average museum goer spends 7 seconds looking at a painting, they often take a picture of it and then take a picture of the tag next to it, and then they leave. And I was baffled by this. I couldn't believe it. But I realized that while working at the Phillips, it's totally true. But then if something in the painting makes you and asks you and invites you to stay a little longer, you might learn more about it if you spend more than 7 seconds on it. And so I wrote the three sisters, and I haven't really exactly named them, but my imagination would be, even though I'm the youngest, I'm the one with my head sticking up at the top right corner because I'm always the one that's talking. I'm always the one that's figuring out what other people are doing. I'm planning. I'm always asking questions. And my son, who's 4, does the exact same thing. And then there's the middle one, which is my oldest sister, who's always trying to make sure everyone's okay. Just kind of surveying the space, making sure, okay, is everyone, yeah, everyone's good over there. Okay. And she's kind of our mother figure between the three of us. And then there's my middle sister, the one on the left, who's always had her head in the books. She's the doctor who said, there's always one doctor who knows what's going on up there and knows what's going on down here, because she knows everything, because she listens to everything and she reads everything. So that's kind of where I would say my sisters are. Thank you for that question.
Well, now it's 7 p.m. and I think we need to let everybody have their dinner and invite them again to please come to the ballroom gallery to see Alice's exhibit. It will be there for June and July, and Claire is going to post our address or our website actually, and that might be the best way for you to have the phone number and everything else, and so that you can come. We're on New Hampshire and Q streets in DuPont Circle, and on the side on Q Street, if you're coming down that way, you'll see a lot of sculptures there of an artist that used to live in DuPont Circle, and you know that you're at the right building. So do come and do join. We do, as Nuchi Couriers said in our introduction, some very exciting things, gun violence, all sorts of things. And for those of your students who are old enough, who might want to even intern with us over the summer, we have some very interesting and fascinating jobs for everybody to do, those who are in the arts. Claire has all kinds of yummy things for them to do. But even otherwise, if they're interested in other ventures, we, just they have to say what they're interested in. And that's where it'll go. But Alice, we're delighted. Thank you so much. And we look forward to enjoying your art for the next few months at the club. Thank you again. And thank you everybody for having come on this Zoom. And I encourage you all to come down to see the work. Thank you.
Thank you.